Keep it alive through these lines I write. I keep it live cause I thrive. I might just blow your mind tonight. I'm so hyped, but it's no hype. From this height, it's direct hits on sight. I'm your type, lend me your ears to show you that there's something in me. I'm not giving up, I'm standing right here, holding these days hostage. And I'll make this my year. We turning fear into love, and the love's in the air. I love doing this cause nothing compares. Nothing can share that same type of feeling when you feeling and flare. They can't catch it, it's havoc. I rip to a tear, switch the scenario. My stereos, I leave them impaired. Variables start to change and they're all in my range. I just gotta grab it, it's all mathematics. Every step is drastic, I make it fantastic. I'm trying to take your breath away. Asthmatic.
This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo.
Yeah, just nod your head with it. So explicit and vivid. Every image is intricate, intimate. I put my all into it. No scrimmage and no rules. I'm a pro tool. Hear my heartbeat beat into the vocals. I'm so loco, lost my mind, oh no. It's ponderoso, dope, so no overdose, cause it's dope, yo. Man, this is house grown, mixed with some milestones. So I let the style flow down like the Dow Jones. Bringing it with some foul tones, letting the crowd know we getting loud, so it's eardrum rudiments. Yeah, we bring it rude again. Move, little hooligan. Music for tuning in, full time to the 10. I'm on my clock like I told you. I'm doing this for dreams we pursuing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anti-Media Radio, once again with your host Nick Bernabe here on UCY.tv and the antimedia.com/radio. Really happy to be back alive and well on this Monday, April 16th, 2018. And looks like we got some more horrible foreign policy stuff on our hands once again. I mean, it's one of these nonstop things. You know, the biggest issue in this country is the empire, and it's the biggest issue that doesn't get enough coverage or enough criticism. In fact, if you look at most mainstream media sources, they're applauding the majority of the foreign policy stuff. I mean, they're like egging it on. Washington Post, we mentioned this in the last show, talking about how popular airstrikes were last time around in Syria, last time Trump did it about a year ago. They're just egging it on at this point, and so we're going to talk about this, and we're going to talk about some of the questions that need to be asked, and just crazy bomb first, investigate the issue later situations. It's not good. It's not healthy. And there's just not enough opposition either. That's the thing that really bugs me. Joining me tonight, I've got our awesome journalist, Jake Anderson, on the line. What's up, Jake?
Hey, man. Not a whole lot. Just trying to finish my taxes.
Oh, there you go. Sorry. Got to pay those taxes so they can keep bombing countries, right?
Yeah, it really pisses me off.
It's annoying, dude. And that's
it's like a day of my life flushed down the toilet so they can go to war.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And plus, all the work you do for the rest of the year, you know, they take an incremental amount out of your check, and then they go ahead and send it back to people with their tax returns. And so I never understood that, really, the tax return thing.
It's so stupid. It's unbelievable. I mean, I know there's a rhyme and reason behind it, but it for most people it's really arbitrary.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous, and the fact that people are like super happy about it too. It's like, dude, you guys need to realize you're not getting free money. It's money they took from you, and it's like they steal it from you. And then it's like a burglar saying, "Well, we're going to give you 20% back what we stole," and people kind of like celebrate it, It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Jake,
yeah. Why don't they just take all our money and just give it back to us at the end of the year, and what we get all happy about? Look how much money I'm getting. They should just take our entire paycheck.
Yeah, I mean, why not just, why not we just, everyone works and the government takes all the money and they pay us out every month and pay our bills for us, so we don't have to burden ourselves with making our own financial decisions, right? maybe that's a solution. No, I'm just kidding. Jake, what's your take on this Syria debacle, man? There's a bunch of different opinions on this, and I know there's a lot of people on various sides supporting it and opposing it. What's your take?
Well, unsurprisingly, an enormous amount of people on the left don't have a problem with the attack. People that I marched in anti-war protests with during 2003 Iraqi invasion they've just gone full neocon now, and they use these kinds of historical justifications like, well, people who don't call for intervention now but you have stayed silent in 1941, and just really kind of specious arguments for justifying it. And I don't know what happened, man. It just seems like it's almost like there's no legitimate anti-war. Somehow the establishment has neutered the anti-war movement so that it's almost unstylish now, and you almost get the feeling that people think you're kind of crazy if you're anti-war now, or somehow you're too idealistic, or you're naive or something. They've been so drawn into this narrative that these wars are necessary and these are complex situations that they've just kind of created this groupthink around going to war, and it's really horrifying. I can't even tell you how freaked out I've been seeing some people and what they've been saying about it. But yeah, we'll see how it plays out in Syria. I mean, if it really was just like a very limited strike, it'll probably go down in history is not that big of a deal. I don't know what the body count is on it yet. I'm sure the numbers are going to be fuzzed over, but I seriously doubt that's going to be the extent of what happens in Syria. They've clearly opened the floodgates. They've been talking about wanting to topple Syria since before 9/11, and they've laid out a pretty extensive blueprint for how they wanted to, how they wanted regime change there. They've been talking about it for years, and it just seems like they're going right through their list one by one, and sometimes their schedule gets thrown a little out of whack. But they're just meticulously going through the Middle East and picking off these countries that are either opposed to the petrodollar or in some way are blocking pipelines we need, or, just down the line, they're figuring out a way to just let imperialism loose, and it's just pretty scary to hear the justifications for it.
Yeah, it is. It's really unnerving, the lack of opposition from, anybody with that could actually have a chance of influencing Trump's decision making. I mean, it's pretty clear that there isn't a popular enough movement to get Trump to notice. I mean, I didn't see 100,000 people marching on Washington D.C. I mean, the night of the strikes, I saw like a dozen people outside of the White House protesting. Dude,
the only people in the media, and Glenn Greenwald pointed this out actually, the only people in the media were two conservatives, Laura Ingraham and Tucker Carlson, were the only people that questioned the war. That's it. Those two. And everyone else was cheerleading. That's what we've gotten to now. Like two right-wing pundits are now the only anti-war people in the media.
Yeah, it's sickening, dude. It's sickening. And the biggest criticism I saw from like the mainstream liberal media, Rachel Maddow and stuff, is that this is just a distraction for Trump to, distract us from the Stormy Daniels thing. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to say that this was a wag the dog situation, maybe that is partially the case. But I mean, bombing another country is not just some stupid distraction. I mean, it's a really, really big deal. And look, if you look at the laws on the books, right? And of course, look, the laws on the books don't mean fucking shit for these motherfuckers that run the show. The Constitution doesn't restrain them. In fact, they've just turned it against us to use it to control us and all that stuff. But in theory, and you'd have to look for like someone like Rand Paul or Justin Amash saying this stuff on Twitter. members of Congress who genuinely are like these constitutional conservative types. Striking a country like that, not in self-defense, is not only against U.S. laws and the U.S. Constitution. When you do an act of war, you need to have authorization from Congress. But it violates all of international law too. It goes against the international rule of law. You can't just bomb a country because you think they did something bad. You have to bomb them in self-defense, or you have to, in the case of the U.S., you have to get Congress to give you like a declaration of war, or let them tell you, okay, you can do this and you can do that, and that's it. What Trump did and what he did last year around the same time, it's completely illegal. And if another country did that kind of thing, there would be, rightfully a bunch of condemnation. And it's very similar to... Go ahead. Well,
imagine if Syria bombed us when our government gassed people at Standing Rock. I mean,
exactly.
We would have obliterated them off the planet.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if China started dropping airstrikes because they said we were killing the cops are killing too many people.
Right.
and China was like, well, we need to protect African Americans from the U.S. government, so we're going to do an airstrike, a limited airstrike on Washington D.C. Because we feel that we need to protect these people. It doesn't make sense, and especially considering that the U.S. is the backer of many, many human rights abuses around the world. The most obvious example, which is ongoing right now, is with Israel and what they've been gunning down protesters, and they shot like 700 people. They didn't kill them, but 700 people got injured from getting shot at by Israel. And it was like a few days later, Israel starts dropping bombs on Syria, saying, "Oh, we're trying to protect civilians." Like, what about the civilians in your own backyard? And the U.S. is, of course, supporting the Yemen operation, the Saudi-led Yemen operation. That is a straight-up human. It's a crime against humanity what's going on in Yemen, and the U.S. is fully backing that. In fact, we're like refueling the Saudi planes in the air, right? Like enabling this massive, basically a genocide. And then it's like, oh my God, Assad used chemical weapons supposedly, and we got to do something about it. Again, jumping the gun because the investigators, the actual UN investigators who should be a little bit more independent, a little bit more unbiased, they haven't even done the investigation yet. In fact, they landed in Syria the day a little earlier in the day when those airstrikes started happening. So the investigation hasn't even been done. There's no reason why you can't wait a couple weeks and say, okay, we're going to wait. We're going to give Assad a chance, give it a couple weeks, and let's see if these investigators prove that Assad did something. They're doing it like a few days later without any proof.
Well, Nick, the reason is because they're destroying the proof. They're destroying the very buildings that are going to go in and be investigated so that they can't determine what was going on in them.
Yeah, literally.
That's one explanation, but there's so little proof that Assad did it, and people that have never ever spouted those conspiracy theories before. I mean, you've been pretty strict about not doing that. Justin King has been pretty strict about not doing that. Pretty much. I mean, it's this is they finally overshot themselves, and now people that have never believed in false flags before are starting to be like, okay, wow, there's really no evidence for this whatsoever.
Yeah, dude, it's just a hurried mess. It's a hurried mess. DB is now joining us on the line. DB Schwartz, welcome to the show, man. What do you think about what the U.S. is doing in Syria, the bombing, the chemical attack? What's your thoughts?
Well, I think it's like I've been saying all along, dude, that Trump was pretty much installed by the military, and they're taking the power. They're trying to shift the power back. It's been held in different private hands in I guess you can say, the central banking cartel and their lackeys in the alphabet agencies that they own. So it's them versus the military, and the military pulls from a public pool of candidates for the most part, and the other side are the blue bloods and the elites. and the family ties. So I don't know, man. There's always been this historical rift that happens where the men with the guns always end up taking over the men with the gold, because why would they continue to follow orders when you really think about it? And I think that's what's going on right now. It's a purge. It's a secret war that could go hot any second. And I think there's people across country lines and party lines working against other people who, I mean, are some of the worst people in the world. So I don't know, man. I really do, in a way, hope the military wins. But of course, when they win, we lose. So it kind of sucks.
Yeah, I think you're onto something, dude. You know, I truly believe they're like competing powers up there. I don't think I think they're all kind of like oligarchs and autocrats in their own way. I don't think any of them actually are looking out for us per se. But there are competing powers. I don't think that there's just one group of people calling all the shots and making all this shit happen. And it's just, they're just like this inevitable power that can't be touched. I don't think that's the case. I think there are dueling powers up there, and you got like the neocon, John Bolton, Project for a New American Century Republican people, and then you have like the neoliberal world order, Hillary Clinton, Obama type, where it's a nice mask over the imperialism, whereas you got the neocons where it's just like imperialism, Reds or whatever, like the strong shit, and it's just pretty obvious. It's like, boom, we're just going to hit people. On one hand, now, of course, I wish, and you could hope, that this kind of open imperialistic neocon policies, which is basically what's taken over the Trump administration, in my opinion. You would hope that these more openly kind of aggressive tactics, kind of like what George Bush was getting, the heat for towards the end of his candidacy, or towards the end of his presidency, you would hope that it would inspire more opposition. But for now, dude, like, who's the most influential Democrat in Congress right now? Is it Chuck Schumer? I mean, he was basically saying, yeah, I support what Trump did. I wish he'd have come to Congress and all that, but I still support what he did. Like, the most influential, quote-unquote, opposition resistance figure is really just more or less just cheering Trump on and, enabling him. I think Bernie Sanders, for his credit, has at least come out somewhat against what's going on with Syria and stuff. So, at least there's that. But, again, the people that really matter here, the big coalitions in government, they're sitting on their hands. They're just, yeah, dude, do it. We'll be against you on pretty much everything. But if you want to start bombing countries and shit, man, go for it. And the quote-unquote liberal media, too, it's the same thing. It's like, well, maybe this is a distraction, but, we had to send a clear message to Assad. I mean, what? We don't even know that these messages work. I mean, he did, supposedly the same thing happened around this time last year, and we did an airstrike, and what kind of message was received? That they're saying he's doing it again.
Well, Nick, we're trying to send him messages, and we hit him with pinpoint strikes, supposedly, where we hit these chemical facilities, and no one even knows really who was in charge of them. But we can guess, because right after we stop, Israel picks it up and starts just lobbing cruise missiles at them, which are getting shot down by these S-400s that Russia put in. So it's a stalemate, and that's why I say it can get hot at any second. It's people don't understand that Russia, they're not weak, okay? They're the strongest economy in Europe. They dwarf Germany, France, and the UK combined in economic output. People don't understand this. They're
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're the third strongest country on the planet right now. People don't get it because they've been listening to our bullshit propaganda. So they have more oil than the rest of the world combined. They need ExxonMobil to get to it. Does that start to make sense why maybe Trump's in where he's in?
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's just... It really is turned into a powder keg over there, and it has been, dude. I mean, we're lucky that shit hasn't popped off yet. Like, we are fortunate that shit hasn't popped off yet. But
well, what's going to happen? I mean, our military is stronger than than Russia, so they really only have like a couple options. One, they can give up, and have they ever? And two, they can retaliate with what they have more advanced than us, which is nuclear ICBMs. I mean, that's where it's going.
Yeah, and so we gotta avoid this tit for tat type stuff. And I've been really happy to see that Russia hasn't responded. Now I don't know what should be done here, but the fact that it hasn't escalated yet is at least the good news for now. Now, again, I think we should look bigger here, a little bigger, and bring China into this, because China has been making it well known that they aren't okay with what's going on with Syria and these kind of, I think they called it unilateral strikes. Hold on, let me pull this up. We got the article here. China slams U.S. arrogance in Syria, backs Russia. Headline on the antimedia.com from Zero Hedge. Couple of basically quotes out of a state-run newspaper, which is kind of the when this newspaper posts something, it's like, okay, this is from the government, more or less, because in China they have the state-run media thing. Anyway, China made it clear that they weren't okay with this Syria thing and that it was a total violation of international law, and they're right. Like, China is correct here. Like, what the U.S. did in Syria is totally not okay. Like, it's a rogue. It's a rogue type of situation, and of course, considering that you've got England and France involved, it doesn't make it any better. But Macron, the president of France, one of his justifications for this was that three UN Security Council members participated, so that therefore it's okay. It doesn't matter. Like, this is a total violation of the law, and it is. If anyone else was doing this stuff, it would be considered a rogue act. It's like, oh shit, this country is totally going off the rails. Like, we need to start talking about containing them. Just like when Russia took Crimea, right? Remember how much of a big deal that was when Russia went and took Crimea? Very similar situation to when the U.S. bombs, Syria. It's totally not okay. And I think now we're starting to see more and more. If you look at the One Belt, One Road and all the people lining up among that, including like Pakistan and a lot of these countries, Bangladesh, a lot of these highly populated countries that are considered more or less, kind of third world, second world, developing countries, they're all aligning with China and places like Syria and Iran, and I'm pretty sure Iraq too. Pretty soon here are going to start. We're going. It's going to be very clear that those countries are part of the China Eastern Alliance, and that you've got the U.S., the UK, and France kind of part of this, Western Alliance. And these are the two new superpowers. Like, nobody can really. I mean, some people would say China's already a superpower. Some people, Russia, I guess, is considered a nuclear superpower. So in some sense, Russia is still a superpower. But there are two superpowers again, and we should already start coming to this conclusion. It's the Chinese bloc, the Eastern bloc, and the Western bloc. And I think there's a bunch of people, and we did touch on this last show too. There's a bunch of people in Europe. In Eastern Europe, Central Europe, that do not want to be part of this. In fact, Italy put out a statement saying that it would never take part in this kind of drill or this kind of strike, and Germany refused to participate as well. There are dissenters within the international community. We may not see dissent here at home with enough people giving a shit about these wars to actually do something about it and put enough pressure on the government to make them stop. We may not see it here, but believe me, the people outside of this country are not as brainwashed. Like, the people in places in Europe that have seen so many damn wars on their soil for just centuries and generations and generations and generations have seen these wars. They don't even want to be a part of it anymore. And, England is kind of separate because, when was the last time England was invaded? That was it's been hundreds and hundreds of years since, England was invaded, right? These people, like the U.S. and England, we haven't seen the wars on our soils for a very long time. But the other people who are more affected by this stuff, they're like, no, dude, we're not okay with you guys doing this. And so, if the U.S. continues doing this stuff, it's just going to be more and more of what we've already been seeing, which is the isolation, the U.S. becoming isolated on the international scene, and more players saying, you know what, maybe we want to work with China. They never threatened to invade us. They just said they're going to build us ports and they're going to build us infrastructure, and we just got to guarantee the paying back of those things with property and with rights to mines and stuff like that. I was just seeing about how China is like trading, massive infrastructure projects for like mining rights and stuff to certain gold mines and things like that, and these kind of up and coming countries, third world countries. And dude, China is laying the groundwork over there, and the U.S. is just getting more and more isolated, dude. Like, I don't know. It's part of me wants to think this is just this airstrike is kind of the U.S. getting ready to bow out. On one hand, on the other hand, I'm worried that this airstrike is going to be the U.S. creeping even further in. I mean, what do you guys think? I guess I'll go back to Jake first. Do you think this Syria thing is going to be a mission creep, or do you think we're going to see the U.S. kind of tuck tail and be like, okay, we stopped them from using chemical weapons, our job is done here? Like, what do you think, dude?
No, I think it'll be a mission creep. I don't know why they would even... I mean, to think that it wouldn't be would be to assume that they did this for legitimate humanitarian reasons, and I don't buy that for a second. And I'm also curious. I'll just put this and see what you guys want to say on it. But I found it interesting that Trump has been putting out remarks saying that he might be interested in getting back in with TPP, which is obviously a separate issue, but. And I might suggest that he's really kind of gone full into a kind of more globalist agenda.
Yeah, that's a really good point that you bring up. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what more to say about that. I don't know why one. I don't know how one would be affecting the other. But in a period of 2 weeks, he's gone from completely being done with Syria to, then his offices are raided. And now all of a sudden he's bombing Syria and talking about maybe going back into TPP. It just curious timing, but
yeah. Let's let DB.
I certainly don't think this is a one-off thing in Syria, though. I'll tell you that much.
DB, you want to respond to that first, and then add some thoughts on this too.
Well, I mean, yeah, the raiding of the offices probably found. I think Stormy Daniels' thing's been a complete. Waste of time for the most part. I mean, if he did it, then he's a scummy guy, and then if not, then she's a scummy chick. They're both scumbags. Who cares? You know what I mean? But what I want to say is it was a big distraction. I think when the offices were raided, they're going to find that he was super leveraged, personally, for his finances, and people are trying to blackmail him left and right. And the military is trying to use them for their own ends. And, I don't know. I mean, the NSA is basically at the top of the food chain right now of the alphabet agencies, and they're not privately funded. So I don't know what that means, reverting back to something like a republic here. I think people need to understand what we've had is a fakeocracy. And to go to a real republic is going to mean we're going to probably have like 10 times the representatives we've had. And you're actually going to have to become involved in politics, or else people will steamroll you with glee. Whereas right now, I think people put on that smile, like you said, the Obama, Clintonite, and then we can throw the Bushes in there too, because they're all the same freaking family. And they were screw you with the smile and we stab you right in the back. And now it's people right in your face with their ideology. So, I mean, you gotta react. You gotta respond.
Now, I really find this point on the TPP interesting, because how many times? Look, everybody talked about TPP. It was a big deal, and it was opposed by many different groups for many different reasons. But when we talked about it on this program, we always kind of looked at it from like a zoomed out perspective, right? And the TPP, to me, was always an anti-China trade zone, buffer zone, basically. And if you look at the map of all the TPP countries, you see it's like the Pacific Rim, right? That's why it's called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And it's all these countries that are basically surrounding China, right? including a bunch of those island nations that are part of the South China Sea, part of the East China Sea. And we've said that, and I've said this before. If anyone's been benefiting from Trump, it's been China. It hasn't been Russia, because our ties with Russia aren't any better than they were when Trump got elected. In fact, at this point, they're much worse. China, on the other hand, has basically gone and just has been moving mountains. And when Trump came in, and Trump and Sanders were both against the TPP. Trump came in, killed the TPP, and China was ecstatic. I mean, if you look at the TPP, there's a notably missing country in there. China is not part of it, and it was always an anti-Chinese trade deal to contain them, and it was an answer to this one belt, one road thing, which still nobody is even talking about. It's the biggest fucking thing on the planet right now that nobody is really paying much attention to, probably by design, because China's trying to keep it on the down low, and they're not trying to show their whole hand before it's ready. But basically, once they finish this project, we're talking about 2/3 of the world's population all connected in direct routes to China, and all part of a huge trade deal. And we're talking about billions and billions of people. Most of the people in the world are going to be affected by this thing. And so it's such a big deal. The TPP was meant to contain it. Trump torpedoed that. The other countries went along and still went with it. But now Trump reversing course on the TPP, well, I think it has a lot to do with the coming to realization. It's one thing when you're running as a candidate, and the TPP is a very unpopular, policy. And Trump had all that Cambridge Analytic data. He knew that TPP was a big deal. We know that everyone hates the TPP. Trump ran on that, and he delivered on it. But now he's like, oh shit! Now I understand. Now, someone got in his ear and said, dude, listen. If you don't do the TPP, China's going to crush us much quicker than we'd like, because we could delay it with the TPP thing, but if we don't, then they're going to have an even better, position. And that's what it's all about, dude. Trump's going with this trade war with China, and I'm telling you guys, this thing in Syria, I think that Russia takes the heat for a lot of anytime that the U.S. gets checked on foreign policy anywhere around the world, most times Russia kind of takes the heat for that. But in the end, it's actually China who is the beneficiary of it. So I think we have to start wondering about whether China is actually the one calling the shots for Putin. I seriously wouldn't doubt that, because it seems like at the end of every rabbit hole they chase down trying to pin the Russians for whatever, various things, China's always on the receiving end, is the beneficiary, dude. And so I think that the relationship between Russia and China, for the first time in a long time, is actually very, very close. And they've actually been saying it. A couple of their spokespeople, a Chinese guy was in Russia, and he said it too. He's like, Russia-Chinese relations have never been better. They've never been better. And all this time, Russia has taken the heat for causing all these problems for the United States. At least, China's getting blamed, or Russia's getting blamed for all these problems. And China's over there cozying up ever closer to the Russians. So you gotta assume that there's something going on there. And these guys are definitely they are the counterbalance now. And the Chinese just aren't ready yet to show their hand. They're not strong enough on military. They're trying to build up, but they're not strong enough yet to actually say, hey, dude, we're the new kid on the block now, so you better check with us before you do anything stupid. They can't do it quite yet, but they're getting really, really close. And so I think that's the empire playing out, along with this new kind of pole on the other side of the world that's going to be the counterbalance to it. That is the single biggest story of our time, because we're dealing with what we have as a declining empire, a rising new force on the east, and that is seriously going to be the biggest story that plays out, not only in our lifetimes, but lifetimes, generations after us. And it's really taking a back seat to all this other superficial crap that's been going on with all this distractionary stuff, and maybe just in a vacuum, considering the limited scope of the strike, you could say it is a wag the dog, thing in Syria to distract or to capitulate or to say, okay, we did our job. Whatever it is that they actually had going on, probably a combination of a bunch of different things. It's kind of smaller than the bigger power moves here going on. And the fact that Russia isn't really backing down, it's a point of reckoning. This whole Syria thing is the first time the U.S. has been challenged since, like, the early 90s after the first Iraq war. We haven't been challenged since then. Like, we went in there unopposed. No one had Iraq's back. Just like no one had Libya's back. No one had, Iraq's back the second time. Nobody got Afghanistan's back. But now, we're seeing this emergence of, in this case, Russia, willing to stand up to us in Syria. It's a point of reckoning, dude. Big deal. It's going to be interesting to see the psychology that plays out here, because we got Trump, which is the loose cannon. He's very unpredictable. We have that. But at the same time, we have to understand, these guys have to also be knowing that they're in decline and they're in big trouble. Like, they have to know that the U.S. brand is kind of sinking, and that there's going to be a new, it's like from MySpace to Facebook. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's going to be a new brand in town that's going to be stronger and better and more efficient and do things differently. These guys have to know, and that has to be factored into what they're doing. And so, and I know DB has brought this up several times before, but we have to. The other big threat, I think maybe the biggest threat we have to worry about is that these lunatics that run the United States right now, if they'd rather see the ship sink than see it get downgraded, like would they rather start a giant war than see the U.S. go into second place? That's, I think, the big question, and that's the question that's going to play out. That'll decide whether we're going to have a giant war or if we're going to relegate our empire peacefully. DB, I want to bring you in on this, dude, because I know we've talked about this before. What do you think about China's role in all this, dude?
Historically, before all the way up into the first Opium War, they were the world's preeminent commercial and economic powerhouse, just simply because where they sit and because of all their power being focused on their eastern seaboard. And they've always needed a trade, because even though they've terraced the hell out of every scrap of land, they still can't grow enough food for their people. So they need to fish and trade for food. So they've always been that. They've traded silk, they've traded gold, and their art and pottery, and you name it. They were high culture. They were the first. China's
probably been the singular biggest economy for most of the time in the whole world, right? Like, yeah,
they founded America. Actually, they landed in America in 1418. I want to say. I mean, you're talking an entire couple generations before Columbus supposedly hit Hispaniola, so not even the landmass. And that's why I've always joked to give California back to China. But at any rate, there was a guy, he had a thing that could do cross Pacific fleet, like a huge sailboat. So I can't remember his name, but there's a whole book about him. And that was the way that was their claim to fame, until Britain was able to harness gunpowder and have cannons on their ships, and then they were able to sink the Chinese fleet, and then they were able to make the Opium Wars go inland, take over Hong Kong, all that. The Rothschild Bank took over everything, and then they got half the population addicted to opiates. So that's how you kill a civilization for a while. But like you said, you can't keep China down. China's been through untold horrors, and they're coming back because they're the tiger. You know what I mean?
China, man. Yeah, dude. Yeah. Biggest economy, I'd say, for the last 3,000 years, I would say like 2,500 years of it, China's probably been the single biggest economic driver of the whole world, right?
And what's the most ironic thing about China and what's coming back now is that they've always been a Christian nation, and that Christianity is coming back big time.
Interesting. So yeah, dude, it's time for a new kid to be on the block. I think the U.S. it did what it did, and it did made mistakes. Could have been worse. Could have been much better, right? But I think that it's, in some ways, I think it's healthy to have counterbalances. On the other hand, it's also kind of risky too, because these dudes could go to war with each other. But I think when you get to that size and strength, and you have like a mutual destruction kind of policy, then it kind of makes it so you guys can't really fight each other. And that's my hope, is that I hope that Russia and China together are strong enough that the U.S. really can't fight them, because it would be mutual destruction. If there was a Western versus Eastern empire massive battle, both countries would nuke the entire, the whole world would get nuked and nobody wins, right? So as dire and horrible as that sounds, I think that same reality means that these guys really can't hit each other directly, and that's why they're doing these proxy wars in Syria. I mean, this may sound horrible as hell, but you got to think that a lot of it is they're trying to do training, they're trying to test out weapons, they're trying to sort out how they're going to do urban warfare and all that. These guys are practicing. China hasn't been, China hasn't had how do I want to say this? I know China had military and stuff back when the Japanese got them, but it wasn't like a big organized military, because I think they were
not mechanized at that time.
Yeah, and so China hasn't really been in many modern modern wars. So part of it is them trying to also figure out using proxy wars to fine tune your strategies and your machinery and your weapons and stuff like that. And that's horrible, but that's the truth of it, dude. I mean, that's part of it. And so this war again, dude, is just more and more of this. Shooting people before shit's even figured out. It's just, it's upsetting, dude. Like, it really is. And the fact that we have to go out and pay for this shit.
It just seems like they're setting stuff up for heavy losses. I don't know, Nick. Like, trying to condition people psychologically that some huge thing is going to pop off here soon. And there's nothing to do. There's not really any way to stop it. And it's because of these other evil powers and entities in the world. And dude,
historically,
it's just,
we're pretty overdue for a big war. I know we
are, but we ought to just use those resources to get off this freaking planet.
Yeah, they haven't quite figured out how to, that. The problem is the future we're headed towards is decentralized, and the centralized world doesn't really know how to transition into that. How could they? So there's almost like an entire paradigm shift that's about to happen when power is more decentralized, and that includes economic, but it also includes going out into space and all that stuff. It's hard to imagine a spacefaring future humanity being heavily centralized and a colonizing force. Seems like it's almost inefficient, almost.
Oh yeah, dude. I think it's interesting that we're seeing private space exploration. Because there's a lot of, I guess the moon, and people can claim jurisdiction over the moon, but once these companies, like for instance SpaceX, once they're able to really get far out there where there's no jurisdiction, they can these companies can recreate their own civilizations if they want, and try to recreate it in a different way. I think if the government in its state right now, if we put the government in charge of going out to Mars and establishing a colony out there, next thing we know, there's going to be some horrible, stupid shit going on over there, and we're going to be like, what the hell are we funding? But I think it is pretty interesting about these companies going out there now. But Jake, I wanted to get your take on this kind of. I've been trying to figure out what to call this, and I've come down to a conclusion. So when we talk about companies that are able to influence the Congress a lot, influence the government, we call it regulatory capture, right? Where the regulations are kind of captured and created by these companies in order many times to help them out, not control them, but help them and control their competitors, right? It's called regulatory capture. I've been trying to figure out what to call the media in the United States, and I've come down to this: empire capture. That's what I call it now. Where basically the media in this country is so captured by the empire that it literally, anybody speaking out against it is considered like a traitor, right? And the example I want to bring up here is the anti-media and a bunch of many of these other websites that were listed. You remember when that list came out about the all the media outlets that were useful stooges for the Russians, right? And we were listed on one of those. And I looked through the list and I figured out that outside of the just straight up bullshit sites, the majority of them were sites that just genuinely questioned the state of foreign policy in this country and the state of the empire. And anyone that questioned that was branded onto this list as a Russian collaborator, Russian stooge, Russian useful idiot. Most of these people got deplatformed. Like, their reach was taken away, our reach was reduced. Many of those people were kicked off of many platforms. And at the same time, the media like super attacked all these websites, right? You remember the Washington Post kind of got the ball rolling. Everybody reported it. It was out in the AP. All these media people attacked these other websites. And you'd think of media websites as people who would support the First Amendment, support free speech. These other media outlets, mainstream media, were attacking independent media and fighting against their free speech. And I find the timing pretty suspicious and how it's kind of coinciding with the lack of opposition to these wars. Maybe part of the reason why we're not seeing as much of an anti-war movement is because all the independent voices that would actually question the foreign policy have already been more or less deplatformed by Facebook, Google, Twitter, Reddit, all the big media pipelines. That's what I think is going on. And then what I wanted to ask you about, Jake, is what's your theory on why like MSNBC and CNN are so pro-empire? Like, why do you think that is, why does that phenomenon exist?
I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, that's a tough question as to why. I mean, ultimately, I just think it comes down to, shared interest. These media companies are controlled from the top down by, really just a few billionaires. And, barring that, granting that we don't really know the full story of what's going on at the kind of higher reaches, they have a shared interest in centralizing control in one, over media, over dissent.
And think about this. Think about this angle here. Many of these media companies are owned by publicly traded companies, right? By big companies that are on, you could trade them on stock exchanges and shit. Why would anybody want to own shares or own the stocks of a company like that owns CNN? Or, for instance, with Bezos that owns Washington Post. Why would someone want to do that when the media industry is not really known for making profits? It's because by owning into these companies, by owning being a shareholder of the company that owns CNN, for instance, means that you can tell CNN you could partially be in charge of CNN, basically, right? You can have a say. You could have voting power within CNN. And so I think a lot of it has to do with people that own the media they're not just regular investors trying to make money. These are very, very powerful people who are trying to control influence and control the basic reality, basically, that we know because a lot of it's presented through the media. They're not doing it because they're just honest businessmen trying to make a buck. These guys are trying to spread influence, not make profits. But they make, like Washington Post, for instance, they probably don't make very much money at all, but Bezos, using the Washington Post, is able to help Amazon probably make millions of dollars by shielding them from criticism or giving them free public relations.
Right.
Yeah, and so
Yeah, there's a lot of interlocking interests going on that we don't see, you know. And no, I think that's a good point. I mean, companies like Amazon and the bigger tech companies at this point, they really are kind of like part of the government. So yeah, they absolutely have an invested interest in shielding themselves from investigative reporting.
yeah, dude. So I think that's part of it.
It's pretty scary. I mean, it's pretty terrifying to see what's going on in the media right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I get it, dude. If I had no moral compass, and I was a and I was a weapons manufacturer, and let's say I was the guy in charge of Raytheon, who makes some of these advanced weapons that are used in strikes against Syria, for instance. If I had no moral compass and I was in the business of just making money, at risking everything and just at not regarding life, just making money, then yeah, dude, I would say, yeah, you know what, we should buy like a 25% stake in Fox News or the parent company of Fox News, and we should get them to help us sell more weapons by creating fucking wars, conflicts. As horrible as that sounds, I mean, I honestly think that's a big part of what is going on. Is there's and I guess it's some of the stuff that we've been warning against with the military-industrial complex and stuff like that, and we've been warned against about that stuff for a very long time. What was it Eisenhower that warned us about that, I think?
Yeah, but even he didn't understand how interconnected the media would get in all of it. I mean, they had an inkling of it with Operation Mockingbird, but no one knew how consolidated the media was going to become.
Yeah, and I think in the U.S., I mean, look at the spending, even just the government spending on military, which is like close to $1 trillion a year at this point. A lot of that money is going off to these, military contractors for the most part, and all the suppliers and all the weapons manufacturers and all that stuff. And so this is the arms industry is probably the war-making industry is probably one of America's biggest industries, man. Like, it's huge, it's enormous. And so the fact that these guys are able to capture the media, it's not even that surprising. It makes sense. The thing that sucks is how they're not competitive where they just, compete against somebody. They've used these underhanded tricks with this fake news nonsense, getting all these social networks to start censoring people, branding everybody as a Russian stooge. Like, they've played dirty and they've screwed people, and they've gotten these huge companies like Facebook and Google to go right along with it. It tells you how influential these people are. They're really big. Like, these are the guys that we need to be worried about. But it's become just this blind, faceless machine. It's not even like, we can't even really say, oh yeah, the CEO of Raytheon is the guy causing this shit. It's not even that. It's part of the machine now, and it has been for like 60 years. Like, the military-industrial complex has been around since World War II, and it's not going away. And they'll do a bunch of crazy shit to keep it going, including, and I wouldn't be surprised if they staged attacks like the one in Syria. I would not be surprised if it were staged in one way or another. Because these guys need these kind of conflicts to keep their fucking money coming in. And it's horrible. It shouldn't be that way.
Half of every dollar that's earned in the U.S. Just think of it that way.
Killing people should not be a fucking business, dude. Like, you should not be in the business of killing people. That is completely fucking wrong, dude. And people say, well, someone's got to do it. Yeah, someone's always going to do it, but you shouldn't. We shouldn't be doing that kind of shit. Like, it's sometime soon we're going to have to realize that, or, stupid shit's going to get worse and worse and keep happening, and sooner or later it's going to be so bad that no one's even going to want to deal with what comes next. You know what I mean? Like, it's about time, dude. Like, what we talked about earlier with the mutual destruction aspect, and how these guys can blow each other up. That should tell us it's a sign. We need to stop doing this shit, because guess what? If the wrong idiot gets in charge, we're gonna blow the whole planet up. Like, it's a sign that we need to start backing off that stuff. And I really do think that this suppression that came after the election, after Trump won, the suppression that hit independent media, because independent media got blamed for Trump winning. Basically, they took a brunt of the blame, and then associated with Russia. So anybody that questioned the status quo during the election and questioned the empire is like, oh yeah, you work for Russia now. After the election, they canceled us all out, dude. So I really do think that's part of the reason why. It's a
pretty useful narrative. I mean, it really makes you question whether Trump wasn't the one who was supposed to win all along.
Yeah, I mean, there's that possibility, and then it's there's not enough media reach that are questioning the empire, because all them people have been blacklisted. For there to actually be a big enough anti-war movement to do something, because that message has been neutralized. I don't think that, honestly, man, like, I talk to people about the thing in Syria, dude, and like most people that I've talked to, and again, this is just my own sampling of friends, but they're like against the strikes in Syria, right? But they don't know what to do about it. Nobody knows what to do about it because they're not hearing much about it. I mean, we posted on the site all the events that we were able to compile for There Was No War with Syria, marches and rallies around the country over the weekend, right? And we compiled as much as these events as we could. But I mean, how many people were able to see that list? How many people were able to see it? A few thousand people? I mean, back in 2013, we were reaching millions of people, dude, and that's I think that's a big cause of this lack of anti-war movement, is that they neutered the anti-war media, dude. And so because that's just such a recent development, where Facebook and YouTube have really like ramped up the censorship and all that stuff recently, and Google, I think that it's just a temporary thing where these guys are going to try to control the narratives, and then it's going to blow back on them, and then Facebook and Google are going to lose customers, and then we're going to start organizing on another platform. And then there won't be anything for them to do about it unless they can get control of that platform too. And Facebook is the same way. Facebook's a publicly traded company, so some dudes, some military-industrial complex fools could own part of Facebook too, and say, hey, you know what? We already own CNN and fucking MSNBC. We need you guys to help us censor out anyone that goes against the narrative, and just come up with a creative reason to reduce them down. Wouldn't be surprised, bro. Wouldn't be surprised if that happened. I don't know if that's actually happening, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. So, we're up against some big power structures here, and that's, it's going to be frustrating, dude. There's going to be shit like what happened in Syria. That shit's going to keep happening. But we're going to keep organizing. We keep building. Sooner or later, we're going to stop this shit because we know it's wrong. Like, people know it's wrong. Talk to people on the street. Ask random people. Ask people that aren't paying attention to all this propaganda. Ask them what they think, and you'll find out that people genuinely are like, oh, no, we shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't be bombing this country. We know, but people are being censored. I think sooner or later we're going to have a big anti-war movement again. But anti-war movements are always reactionary. So to think about it, think about the anti-war movement right now, where there's like maybe a few hundred people out there marching. It's going to get bigger. And there's got to be something that causes it to get bigger. That's what we got to worry about. Anti-Media Radio. What's up?
This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo.